Hi, I'm Ed Brooks with the District 1 Leadership Group. We've just finished with the forum today. I have Tom Johnston with me, who's a candidate for City Council for District 1. And Tom, thanks for joining us. The first question I have for you today is, what are your top two the top two issues for neighborhoods in District 1?
Sure. The first issue I think that's fundamental to District 1 is our community resources. We talk about our parks, our libraries, and our community centers. My family enjoys all the parks and libraries that we have out here in District 1, but those are on the budget acts, and there really isn't a proposal in play to figure out how to save those. And so I think that that's a priority, because at the end of the day, we can mobilize families as much as we want. We can have neighborhood meetings or call people to neighborhood action and call people to neighborhood meetings, but if you don't have any place to meet outside of the philanthropy of the churches and maybe some folks' homes, we're going to have a problem. And if you undercut those gathering points, I think you're going to have a real problem. I think the other thing we have to address is in District 1, and even though it doesn't feel like it's a direct correlation, it is the pension system and how we budget our city resources, because for the amount of money we pay out here in taxes to the city of San Jose, you are actually getting less direct benefit. You could argue that if we just redirected how we fund our services, then you'll actually have more benefit. But right now, as the system sits and the way it's coordinated, we are paying less for what we get out here, and so we have to address the pension system. We're going to have to also address how the city does it structurally works. Its structural deficit. And when I said I alluded to that in the debate, which was, for example, you have people can get consulting contracts for under $100,000. And then it just becomes a consent calendar item, and there's no scrutiny by the city council whatsoever. That goes on all the time. You have a 45% overhead charge for projects over $100,000 in the Department of Public Works, and they don't build anything. They don't even draw up the specs. They just oversight. Those are kinds of things that, again, as I said, you can't save. Maybe you won't save $20, $30, $40 million, but you'll save enough money to staff programs that we need out here in District 1.
Great.
I think that's the best.
Awesome. So the second thing is budget priorities. We know that there's a $116 million shortfall this year.
Yeah.
If you could wave a magic wand, and there were two, and what would you cut in the budget? We know that there's some unpleasant choices that need to be made.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, we have to do that. What would you cut?
That's a good question. I think for me it's less about cut and reorganization. For example, in the police department, you have police officers who, whether they're on disability, hurt on the line of duty, as Pete was, and I respect him for his service. You have those types of officers who take desk jobs, but they get paid at the police officer on the street rate. You have to reduce that. You got to eliminate that, because you're not getting any direct benefit as a resident, because even though they might be a sworn police officer, they're most certainly not in your neighborhood. When I talk about disability, again, we're talking about maybe changing the cap. Right now, you can retire. When we talk about pensions, you can say, well, right now, a police officer can retire at 50. We have to change that, because that balloons our pension system. So it's recalibrating sort of these things around the edges, but then it's also about, as maybe even David suggested, we review the city charter, because some of this stuff is going to be in charter. So they are cuts, but they're also very sort of structural in terms of how we work as a city, because I think that has as much of an impact to what we aren't getting out here as what we are getting.
Great. So the third question has to do with communities. The SNIs have funding, that sort of thing. But how would you prioritize community centers and the services they provide? Things like the Starboard Community Center that provides programming for teens, right?
Yeah.
How would you prioritize that in the budget?
Sure. I think I'd make it a number one priority. As having the luxury of working across the city in some pretty struggling neighborhoods, you see what happens when you take out a community center or you take out a library. It has a devastating impact on what we do or how communities interact with each other. Starboard Park is a very unique example, or Starboard Community Center as well as the park. There was a homicide in that park a few years ago. The Boynton Neighborhood Corridor and all the families around there rallied the city to, update the existing Starboard Community Center, and then try to program it in an effective way. If you take out that funding and you take out that programming, where are those kids going to go? Because the thing is, they're not their kids or those kids, they're our kids. And as it is right now, there are families and friends that, cross-commute across town and come into our neighborhood. And if there isn't even programming for them, what are we going to do? So I would make my specific priority would be to protect our community centers. And some of the things we can do are actually partnering with a lot of the community-based organizations that exist out there. The city wants to give up those community centers. They want to give them away. They want people to manage the operation and maintenance. The problem is they want to charge market rate. If you're a nonprofit, you're a nonprofit. You don't make a dime. So you can't absorb that cost. So if the city is genuine about offering up that space, then they got to stop saying, well, we got to charge market rate. Give community centers to the neighborhoods. Let them manage the operation and maintenance, because I guarantee you they'll do a heck of a lot better job than what we've got now.
Okay. Finally, is there anything you'd like to set the record straight on? Anything that's gone on at the campaign or at the forum today?
Sure. No, I think it's great. I'm very new to politics. I'm not new to the city and how public service works, but I'm very new to politics. It's been an exciting process for me. The one thing I didn't get to sort of finish on, and as you could tell I'm a little long-winded, was when I talked about my three-pronged strategy. We talked about, we got to go after the pensions and the structural issues associated with that. We talked about, and I tried to talk about the structural deficit and how that impacts our daily living. And I think the third thing is we really have to go after figuring out how to grow business and cultivate small business and medium-sized business and private investment. I think if we don't do those things as a three-pronged approach, we're in the weeds, and I think we can all do that together. And that's one of the reasons I'm running for city council.